Hello and welcome to the 2021 World Hydropower Congress. It's time for action on climate, and this Congress brings together the world's most important thought leaders, decision makers and innovators for an historic virtual summit to determine priorities for hydropower development. The Congress runs for 3 weeks until the 24th of September. Think of it as a virtual global film festival with 2 or 3 events a day, which you can join live or catch up on afterwards. And you can follow on social media with the hashtag World Hydro Congress. I hope you've already had a chance this morning to see the pre-opening conversation with former Prime Ministers Tony Blair and Malcolm Turnbull on the climate challenges facing the world. The Congress will showcase how sustainable hydropower is part of the solution to climate change working. Renewables working together. Speakers from around the globe will set out how investment is urgently needed now to build the smart, resilient, clean energy infrastructure of the future. As we look ahead to the United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP26, this is hydropower's opportunity to commit and demonstrate its critical role in the clean energy transition for decades to come. I'm delighted to introduce the 2 co-hosts of the Congress. Carlos Alvarado is President of Costa Rica, and Roger Gill is President of the International Hydropower Association. We're going to hear first from President Alvarado.
Hola a todos y todas. En nombre del Gobierno de Costa Rica les extiendo una cordial bienvenida al Congreso Mundial de Hidroelectricidad 2021. Espero que este encuentro sea provechoso en el debate, aprendizaje e identificación de puntos comunes para hacer frente a los grandes retos que tienen nuestros países en materia de electricidad. Desde que comenzó la pandemia, se han puesto a prueba las economías y los sistemas de salud de prácticamente todos los países. También se ha puesto a prueba la solidaridad mundial y nuestra capacidad de alcanzar acuerdos como humanidad para salir adelante de esta situación. Esa misma capacidad de lograr acuerdos que se ha hecho visible en medio de la crisis sanitaria mundial que vivimos es la que necesitamos traer a este espacio. El Congreso Mundial de Hidroelectricidad es una oportunidad no solo para hacer un balance de lo que hemos avanzado, sino que es una oportunidad inmejorable para acordar formas de enfrentar los retos comunes que tenemos en materia de crisis climática, energías renovables y asequibles, saneamiento y transición energética. La descarbonización de nuestras economías y la promoción de la capacidad hidroeléctrica sostenible son indispensables para que logremos enfrentar de manera adecuada y solidaria la crisis ambiental. Es indispensable duplicar la capacidad hidroeléctrica sostenible para el año 2050, así como promover los paquetes de estímulo económico verde más allá de los próximos 3 años. Sé que no son retos sencillos, pero justamente por eso debemos enfrentarlos, porque hemos demostrado en otras ocasiones un potencial enorme para superar obstáculos. Costa Rica busca ser y es un ejemplo en energía eléctrica. Nuestra matriz eléctrica está conformada en un 98.71% de fuentes renovables. Nuestra cobertura de servicio eléctrico nacional es del 99% y nuestra generación eléctrica produce muy bajas emisiones. Además, en 2019 presentamos al mundo nuestro Plan Nacional de Descarbonización para que nuestro país pase a ser un emisor neto cero al año 2050. Estamos convencidos que la nueva economía del siglo XXI debe ser digitalizada, descentralizada, justa y también verde, azul y sostenible. Si un país pequeño de Centroamérica ha logrado lo que ha logrado y se ha impuesto los retos que se impone, otros países con más recursos y territorio también lo pueden hacer. Ese es el derrotero que hemos asumido. Esas son las bases que se construyen en espacios como este. Nuevamente, siéntanse bienvenidos y bienvenidas a Costa Rica. están en su casa. Muchos éxitos.
For more than 70 years, Costa Rica has been developing hydropower, a vital component of the clean energy mix the world needs to address climate change. Now the country has fully renewable energy, thanks to hydropower's on-demand flexibility and storage services, adding grid resilience. Costa Rica ran on 100% renewable energy for 337 days, 11 months in 2020. Almost 72% of this energy supply came from hydropower. Today, Costa Rica supplies over 99% of its population with electricity.
Ser emisiones netas cero en el 2050 es una meta muy ambiciosa, pero las condiciones las tenemos para impulsar mucho la electrificación de diversos usos y seguir incluso incursionando en nuevas tecnologías como la producción de hidrógeno verde. Creo que tenemos condiciones óptimas y lo vemos como un valor en este proceso de transición energética, porque ahora la clave es que nos movamos, produzcamos todo con esta electricidad renovable, y creo que el país es un ejemplo o un laboratorio para demostrarle al mundo que eso es posible.
This has been made possible by the Reventasón Dam, the largest hydroelectric project in Central America, financed by both national and international banks. The project was independently evaluated against the Hydropower Sustainability Assessment Protocol, looking at the environmental, social, technical and economic aspects. In 2019, Reventasón was awarded the Blue Planet Prize by the International Hydropower Association for its sustainability performance.
En materia de sostenibilidad ambiental y social ha sido fundamental el diálogo con las comunidades de manera que logremos satisfacer las necesidades de ellos y también sus preocupaciones de manera conjunta, donde encontremos soluciones tanto por parte de la comunidad como de la empresa. Entonces sí creo que es posible el poder desarrollar de manera balanceada los proyectos garantizando que no vamos a tener un impacto en la biodiversidad. En el caso de la planta Reventasón, fuimos reconocidos con el Blue Planet Prize de IHA, justamente porque durante todo el proceso constructivo logramos aplicar de manera responsable protocolos y buenas prácticas que nos garantizaran el menor impacto a nivel social como en biodiversidad.
To protect migratory fish, an innovative river offset scheme was established. Data from the last 5 years show that fish variety and quantity have actually increased. A biological corridor was created to enable species like the endangered jaguar to safely cross the basin. And there's been an unforeseen human outcome.
A nivel social, el impacto más grande ha sido en cuanto al empoderamiento de la sociedad. Precisamente al inicio del programa topamos con personas que no conocían la cantidad de especies total que viven en el río Parismina, o también personas de la cuenca baja que nunca habían visitado partes de la cuenca alta del río. Gracias al proyecto de compensación fluvial del ICE y algunas de sus actividades, esto ha venido cambiando a lo largo del tiempo, generando un sentimiento de pertenencia y de posesión del río, y esto desencadena una reacción de protección hacia algo tan valioso como un recurso como es el río Parismina.
Not only is Costa Rica's hydropower delivering clean, renewable and affordable electricity, as well as water supplies, irrigation and the management of floods and droughts, but it's also showing the world how to reduce carbon emissions while building energy security.
Well, welcome to the World Hydropower Congress. And thanks to our sponsors, participation is free and open to anyone in the world. It's in fact enabled us to welcome the participation of new stakeholders to our Congress. And it's great to see so many here from within the industry participating across the globe. Now, it's 21 years since the year 2000 and the World Commission on Dams and their assessment of our industry. And the sector's done a lot of reflecting since then. And we believe we're now ready to play a key role in helping the world face its biggest and most pressing challenge, that of climate change. The theme of this Congress is Renewables Working Together. Now, hydropower can be the enabler of wind and solar, can be a complement to batteries. It can be the creator of green hydrogen. And we believe that these elements together will guide the route to net zero. The IPCC has shown us the climate challenge, and we understand that time is of the essence. The IEA and IRENA and many other institutions agree that we need to at least double hydropower capacity in the next 30 years. Now, to achieve that, investment in hydropower needs to at least double present levels. That's a huge shift in current practice. Major decisions are urgent, given the lead times involved in developing hydropower. So this Congress brings together governments, companies, civil society, international financial agencies, and many other stakeholders to address this amazing global challenge. I'm pleased to say that this Congress will see 4 major initiatives unfold. Firstly, the conclusions of the International Forum on Pumped Storage, which has been led by 13 governments and co-hosted by Malcolm Turnbull and the US Department of Energy Assistant Secretary, Kelly Speaks-Bachman. The launch of the Hydropower Sustainability Standard will occur during this period. It's been developed by a multi-stakeholder group, and it's the first sustainability standard in the renewable sector. The Congress will see a major commitment from the hydropower sector regarding the World Heritage Sites and protected areas, so look out for that. We're also going to be launching a report identifying where we are likely to see the next 850 gigawatts of sustainable hydropower. Now, today I'm delighted to launch the final considerations of the San José Declaration on Sustainable Hydropower. It brings the above issues together in a set of principles, recommendations, and commitments from the sector. These will define how we deliver hydropower in the 21st century. And once they're finalised with your input, this declaration will be taken to COP26 in November. The bottom line of the declaration is sustainable hydropower is clean, green, modern, and an affordable solution to the energy transition. Going forward, the only acceptable hydropower is sustainable hydropower. Within that, we want you to shape this declaration. Whether you're from the sector, from government, from social or environmental NGOs, from international agencies, or just an interested stakeholder, we want your input. Each session of the Congress will explore elements of this declaration and refine the language. The sessions will explore issues as diverse as setting and incentivising good practice, the role of governments and markets, enhancing pump storage, modernisation, dam decommissioning, climate resilience and adaptation, gender, and many other issues. Now, if you want to add your comments to the declaration, please visit our website or the Congress website. Anything you leave before the end of the 22nd of September, we'll do our best to get into the final declaration, which will be published on the 24th of September. I'm really looking forward to 3 weeks of stimulating and challenging discussions. My message to you as participants is that the hydropower sector is ready for the transition and open to improving. Please enjoy the Congress. Help us shape the future. Thank you.
Dr. Fatih Birol is the Executive Director of the International Energy Agency and is often referred to as the most influential person in the world on the subject of energy policy. In June, IEA published its special market report on hydropower, describing it as the forgotten giant of clean energy. We asked him earlier to outline the recommendations of this report and how to ensure they're followed through.
Dear President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, greetings to all of you from International Energy Agency headquarters in Paris. Thank you for this invitation and the opportunity to bring the IEA's voice into this important meeting. 2 years ago in Paris, I had the honor to give the opening remarks at this very same conference, the 7th World Hydropower Congress. And at that meeting, at that conference, I highlighted the key role of hydropower in clean energy transitions and electricity security. I told the delegates, thousands of delegates in that meeting, that when I go to meetings, energy meetings around the world, the voice of renewables, especially solar and wind, and also bioenergy, is always loudly heard, and they are very well represented. This is a good news. But what I told the delegates as well is that the voice of hydropower is not heard enough, is not in line with the hydropower's contribution to the electricity generation around the world. It is the reason I told the delegates 2 years ago that the International Energy Agency will be a strong voice for hydropower in the next years to come. And I have also promised them that the International Energy Agency would make a special report on hydropower, hydropower today and hydropower tomorrow. And we delivered what we have promised in that very meeting. We have recently published our hydropower market report. I would like to bring you a few highlights from this report. First of all, the numbers we have very much underlines the very fact that the hydropower is a forgotten giant of clean electricity generation. And again, looking at the numbers from our report, I see that about 60% of the economic potential of hydropower is still untapped, especially in emerging and developing countries where the electricity demand grows strongly. Now, having said that, in our report, looking at our report, which we carried out with a lot of experts around the world and the industry and the governments, I would like to bring to attention 3, in my view, critical points. First of all, as the attention of governments to hydropower is not given enough, we expect with the current policies in place, the hydropower growth in the world will slow down. This is definitely a wake-up call for the governments. When we look at all the projects in place, we expect a slowdown, unfortunately, for hydropower. This is the number one news I want to share with you. The second, our report shows that the hydropower, in addition to generating vast amount of electricity, it provides flexibility for other renewable sources, such as solar and wind, and as such, it is a very important role. It plays a very important role to maintain electricity security by integrating wind and solar in our power systems. So hydropower provides flexibility. And third, we also highlight that while there is a strong potential for hydropower to grow, and I hope it will grow, it is important that the new hydropower projects are in line with the sustainability standards, and this is, in my view, critical for the next years to come. In that context, we welcome the work done on Hydropower Sustainability Standard by the Hydropower Sustainability Assessment Council and the IHA in assembling a multi-stakeholder group and creating tools which set out best practices for the sector. Dear colleagues, International Energy Agency last May, a few months ago, came up with a landmark report, the Net Zero Roadmap for the entire world's energy sector. And in that report, we have come up with a suggestion, with a pathway, how the global energy sector can be transformed in order to bring the emissions to net zero by 2050. And here we see a growing role for hydropower, but for which we need substantial increase in investments. And we think these investments are almost all of them are economic investments and investment in providing clean electricity, investment in providing flexibility, and investment in electricity security. So I would like to finish my words by telling you, dear colleagues, which I tell many governments around the world, that the hydropower needs to move high in the climate policy agenda. It needs to move up, and it needs to move up right now. We have only a few weeks to a landmark meeting in Glasgow, COP26, and you can be sure that the International Energy Agency, we are doing a lot of work to support the UK government and other governments around the world to have a successful outcome from COP26, and we will continue to be the voice of hydropower in that meeting. I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Welcome to our panel discussion on the challenges and opportunities of hydropower over the next decade. In a moment, I'll introduce our three speakers, but first, a reminder that you can contribute to the San José Declaration. To find the text, please go to www.hydropower.org/declaration. And to join the wider conversation over the next 3 weeks of the Congress, please use the hashtag World Hydro Congress. Joining us now to discuss the challenges and opportunities of hydropower over the next 10 years are Ashok Khosla, Sustainability Pioneer and Chair of the Hydropower Sustainability Assessment Council, Sharbini Suhaili, CEO of Sarawak Energy, and Parvan Sukhdev, President of WWF International. Welcome to our panel. Ashok, I'd like to come to you first, if I may. You're a long-standing pioneer of sustainability. Why are you involved in hydropower?
Well, you know, when you say long-term, I've been involved in environmental issues for 55 years. In 1965, I was privileged to teach the first course on a university course on environment at Harvard to get familiar with the kinds of issues that our planet was facing. That led to my getting involved with the government of India, and I set up and directed the Office of Environment way back in the early 70s. That I joined the UN Environment Program, and this led to many, many ideas about sustainability. I was one of the small group of people who actually wrote the first publication in the world, 1980, March 1980, which was called the World Conservation Strategy, a product of WWF, IUCN, and UNEP collaboration. And that was the first time that the word sustainable development appeared in print. So, you know, we go back a long, long way, and you're quite right. One would wonder why I would be dealing with hydropower, because obviously hydropower has very many different facets to it. But, you know, the world needs energy, and the world needs renewable energy. And hydropower happens to have both benefits and costs, but we need to find those examples of it where the benefits far outweigh the costs. And I got involved recently with the hydropower sector simply because I can see we have very little choice but to exploit virtually every form of renewable energy we have available, and hydropower is going to be one of those. But we want to make sure that it will be sustainable.
Sustainability is the watchword of the Congress. I'm going to come to Sharbini Suhaili. Sarawak Energy has put high priority on the sustainability of its projects. Why have you focused so much on this, and how are you doing that?
Thank you. Well, as mentioned by Ashok as well earlier on, I think this makes a very good business sense and promotes a long-term value creation for the organization and for our stakeholders. And to me, sustainability is key to maintaining our license to operate and the right to grow. And I believe that everyone, including Sarawak Energy, must play a part in this. And as well, the global energy market is changing, and there has been a clear shift towards renewable energy as demanded by the market. And today the world is talking about energy transition, and energy efficiency and renewable energy are the main pillars of this transition. As a company, Sarawak Energy aspires to be the green company of the region and sharing its renewable and reliable and affordable hydropower with its neighbors. And over the decade ago, Sarawak's renewable energy sector has been identified as one of the sectors that will accelerate Sarawak economic development. And Sarawak's terrain, in the tropics with mountains and rivers and abundant rainfall gives us a natural advantage in hydropower development. There is also an economic driver behind this. We know that large hydro currently offers the lowest levelized cost of energy, or LCOE, among the different field technology available today. Solar prices have been falling rapidly, but there are still many challenges in tropical environment, particularly with our thick cloud cover, our long rainy seasons, and other factors here. And as well, Malaysia doesn't have a significant wind or geothermal potential. So renewable hydropower gives Sarawak a sustainable, competitive advantage, allowing us to transfer this saving to our people, and at the same time attract energy-intensive industries by offering a very competitive bulk power tariff. So currently, Sarawak Energy offers the lowest average unsubsidized tariff in Malaysia and among the lowest in the region.
You see sustainability as key to retaining the license that you have to operate. And that's something you're doing voluntarily, or is it a condition of the license?
No, I think to me, if you look worldwide, the customers are demanding, sustainable development, and you look at the COP21 targets, and to me, it is something that we as an organization needs to do. And whatever we do in our hydropower project, for example, we need to adhere to the best practices. And that's why as a company, we have been trying to ensure that all our projects are developed in accordance to the best practices, such as the Hydropower Sustainability Assessment Protocol and ICO guidelines. And to me, that is something that we want to do as a company, because we believe that that is the right thing to do.
Yes. Well, Parvan Sukhdev, both our speakers before you have mentioned how important sustainability is, how it's a watchword, certainly for Sarawak Energy, in how it runs its projects in Malaysia. Conservation NGOs have long been concerned about the impact of dams, but we also face the challenge of needing a lot more clean energy. As Ashok Khoshla said, we do need a lot more clean energy, including backup for wind and solar. So do you feel that hydropower is a good solution?
Well, hydropower dams do come with impacts, that's indisputable, and some are positive, as on the economy and energy transition, and some can be negative in terms of biodiversity, in terms of free-flowing rivers, coastal communities, river deltas shrinking and sinking, and so on. So we need to be conscious of all of these impacts. And sustainability, true sustainability, is about ensuring that, as the United Nations also measures it, impacts on natural, human, social, and financial capital are all plus, 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 multiple positives. So clearly, one has to be thoughtful and circumspect in how one proceeds with the energy transition. And tough choices will have to be made. So I'm pleased to see the declaration is clearly ambitious, and it's a step forward for the hydropower sector, but rigorous implementation is going to be the key. We don't want, the history of hydropower has led, among other things, to the fragmentation of rivers, and it's been one of the leading reasons why freshwater biodiversity populations have declined 84% from 1970 over the next 40 years. So we clearly don't want to see more of that. We're looking forward to tough choices being made and progress being made in the right directions for genuine sustainability.
Ashok Khosla, coming back to you with some of those points, you did say earlier that there are some real positives in hydropower, but there are these challenges, and Parvan Sukhdev has mentioned the impact on rivers and the impact on coastal communities. How do you think the industry can move forward and make sure that these are addressed?
Well, I think basically the sector has been hiding its head in the sand and has created for itself quite a negative view of its operations, and it has to come out of that. And they've begun to realize that because, as Sabine was saying, the social license to operate, which means the consumers, and it's not necessarily a formal certificate or license, but the fact that people will accept hydropower is now no longer a matter of greenwashing. It's going to have to be really genuinely a net positive on all the fronts that Pavan mentioned, contribution to society and to the economy. So we were set up, the HSAC was set up by the International Hydropower Association, in a sense, realizing that they had no future unless there was a very objective, very solid way of judging whether a particular project on using hydropower was acceptable or not. And that's where the new standard comes in. It's being launched on the 8th of September. It's the result of a multi-year, multi-stakeholder process, very deeply looked into by organizations like WWF and all the major environmental organizations, as well as governments, as well as the industry, as well as all stakeholders. And I think it's a very powerful tool. I wouldn't say it's definitively the final version of it. It'll always probably evolve and grow. But at the moment, I think we've got a document and a requirement that, if satisfied properly, will make those projects that are permitted under the standard worth doing. If they have any negative impacts in them, they're not going to be allowed under the standard. So going forward, the only acceptable hydropower is sustainable hydropower, as the San José Declaration says.
Parvan Sukhdev, are you reassured? Are you reassured by what Ashok Khosla has said about this standard under which only sustainable hydropower would be permitted? Is that enforceable? Is that realistic? Is this a real step forward that allays any concerns you have?
It's an ambitious statement, and it's a welcome statement because clearly the intention to be sustainable has been voiced. Now the question is the proof of the pudding, and that will come through a careful and thoughtful selection of appropriate energy choices. And it's about picking the right mix and ensuring that implementation is thoughtfully done so that it doesn't end up with destruction of downstream biodiversity or riverine biodiversity and the loss of livelihoods as a result of loss of silt and shrinking and sinking of deltas. So there's a lot to be considered in this. At the same time, I think one's got to recognize that capacity in the hydropower sector can be deployed in all kinds of allied activities, and pumped hydro is clearly one of them. The sector has the expertise, human capital, as I call it, to use pumped hydro techniques and to build in a manner that doesn't necessarily, if it's carefully done and thoughtfully implemented, build in a manner that causes loss. In fact, it would add to the capacity to store various forms of renewable energy, not just idle, but also solar and wind. So there's a lot to be thought about, and I think we are looking to see this careful implementation of what is clearly a very ambitious statement. I mean, at the end of the day, sustainability is about being, as I said, plus on natural, human, social, and economic financial capital.
And of course, this standard is, we think, the first such standard in the renewables sectors. So that's quite exciting, isn't it? It's kind of an example to other sectors about how to do things. Let me come to Sharbini Suhaili again. What more can you tell us, Sharbini, about your plans for green hydropower?
So yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, we need to ensure that our development is in accordance with international standards, and we have put in place further steps to embed sustainability in our development projects and also in our operations.
Oh, tell us how. Yes, tell us how you've done that.
So today we have a sustainability division that assesses our operations to improve sustainability performance and our strategies. And we measure our sustainability performance and disclose it in our combined annual sustainability report, in line with Global Reporting Initiative or GRI standards, as part of our commitment to transparency. And we work with organizations such as United Nations Global Compact, Malaysia and Brunei to develop sustainability playbook, for example. And in 2019, we launched a biennial sustainable and renewable energy forum to drive regional discourse on sustainability in Southeast Asia. And as well, we became the first Malaysian corporate body to sign the United Nations Global Compact Business Ambition for 1.5 degrees centigrade pledge to further demonstrate our commitment to sustainability and climate action. And on top of that, since 2009, we have implemented off-grid solutions such as standalone solar hybrid, mini micro hydro for more than 20,000 households in the remote areas and communities in Sarawak. And I think that the most important thing is to have the support of the state government. We are fortunate in a way that our state government is very supportive of all these initiatives that what we're doing, and ensure that the agencies and the policies and are there to support us in doing this.
Thank you, Suhaili. Ashok Khoshla, that's an interesting point, isn't it? It does need government support. Of course, there's activities at a regional, national and international level, but certainly Sharbini Suhaili is saying that the support of the government has been essential, really, in helping them to develop green hydropower. How do you see sustainable hydropower being enforced? How do you see the standard being enforced?
Well, the number one player in this is the hydropower sector itself. And clearly, if they are not committed to it, we have a problem. But I believe that they've made enough point already about their commitment that one has to assume that they will make sure that this is a meaningful exercise and that they will not put pressures on the implementation of projects that are not meeting the standards. But government is needed, and it's possible for government policies to be formulated in such a way that hydropower projects are not going to go very far in terms of evaluation and assessment and design unless they meet the standards. But today most big projects can't go forward unless there's financing, there's popular support, there's no major local community antagonism towards them. So there is a whole bunch of reasons why these standards, this standard itself and its ancillaries, the tools with which is done, including the assessment and review and certification, all of these together will make it very difficult for project proponents who have bad ideas about implementing something that's not sustainable. So I would say that it doesn't really need enforcement after a short while, because the enforcement is going to be automatic. As Shabini says, it's a social license to operate. People will not allow, and this has happened. The World Bank, for many years, in fact decades, was not able to finance hydropower projects because of local oppositions. And it's going to be the same. We are looking at the few, maybe many, but probably few, hydropower projects that have the sustainability, the resilience, the lack of risk, the ability to produce major positive benefits from the point of view of energy and other downstream impacts like flood control and so on. So obviously this is going to be something that needs not so much enforcement by government, but being self-evidently a good thing so that no one opposes it.
And that implies also, gentlemen, that there's an education process going on. And of course, the Congress is part of that, because this is going to be discussed over the next 3 weeks, how to make sure that sustainability is really embedded in the sector. But it's also educating investors and other actors, isn't it, to make sure that they understand what the possibilities are. Sarawak Energy is obviously making sustainability a very important part of its operation, Sharbini Suhaili. What would your advice be to other operators? You know, what are you doing that perhaps they should consider, using as a model?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, sorry. So what we have done is we must make sure that you need to get all the stakeholders in line with what we're trying to do here, and we use sustainability as the focus to do that. Yeah, as mentioned by Ashok early on, you need to get all the ducks in a row, because if there are issues in terms of local communities and whatnot, and then you will have problem in trying to implement the project when you go ahead. So we need, first of all, support from the government in terms of the policies are there, and we need support for all the stakeholders to ensure that basically we are able to execute the project as well as we can. And then we need to ensure that what we're doing is in line with, as I said, global standards, international standard, good practices, such that we are able to get support from various stakeholders, and as well in terms of financing as well, because financiers are looking at projects that are sustainable. I mean, today it's very difficult to get finance for coal power plant, for example, right? And so you can see that but hydro we can still get that, and there's still a lot of support on that. But it must be sustainable hydropower development. So we must be able to demonstrate, to say that hydropower development will be value adding to the communities, to the countries, and into everywhere you operate. So I think that's the key thing. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We're discussing the challenges and opportunities of hydropower over the next 10 years with Ashok Khosla, Sharbini Suhaili and Pavan Sukhdev. And you can join the conversation, and please use the hashtag World Hydro Congress. We're discussing the opportunities as well as the challenges, as we've said. Ashok Khosla, how big an opportunity is this, really? Where does hydro sit in relation to some of the other sustainable technologies that you have been involved in over many years? How big an opportunity is it?
Well, hydro at the moment is far bigger than the others, but the wind and the solar and the geothermal and the other technologies are gradually moving faster and accelerating, and will probably in combination exceed hydro in the long run. I see this not as a question of what we were saying earlier as enforcement. This is an enabling mechanism. The hydropower sector was heading for a dead end. There was no way that it was going to be allowed to happen, to go on growing very fast, simply because there are too many fears, too many risks perceived by local communities, by governments, and so on. So we are now actually making it possible for the hydropower sector to be much more self-critical and be able to put forward only those projects that have minimum impact. There's no such thing as zero impact. Even solar and wind have considerable negative impacts to people, to mining areas, to resource use, to many things. But we've now, as Pavan was saying, got to find an optimal solution in which growing populations, growing demand, per capita demand, mean that if we do not manage our energy requirements for the planet and bring them down, then we're going to need to produce energy in greater quantities. And I think in combination, renewables within the next 10 years will be a very large part of the energy solution, and hydropower may well be. But it can only be if it is brutally, very, very acutely measured against the highest standards of sustainability.
Pavan Sukhdev, what are you hoping to see from this Congress, from the hydropower sector? Because obviously we know that the standard is a very exciting development. There's the San José Declaration. What more do you see as coming out of the industry during Congress?
Well, I would very much hope, in line with what the other panelists have been saying as well, that the measurement of hydropower impacts takes on a holistic lens, as in, let's not merely look at the megawatts generated. Let's not merely look at the financing costs and the project ROI, as bankers tend to do. Let's look a bit more broadly and look at the impacts on local communities. Look at the impacts on riverine biodiversity and populations, biomass of that. Let's look at downstream agricultural impacts. Let's look at the impacts on deltas. Let's also look at the impacts on the energy transition, of course, and let's look at the economic multiplier on the economy. So this means looking at impacts in the wider lens and then making sensible choices as a community, as a society, and therefore looking at a much better understanding of the wider and more transparent reflection of the wider impacts of hydropower, which will be brutal because it'll need acknowledging a lot of things that are not working and not necessarily desirable, but it'll also be beneficial, in my opinion, because that's how good choices can be made.
And when you say make those good choices, and sometimes difficult or even brutal ones,
yes,
what are you getting at there? What kind of choice might need to be made?
Well, to give you an example, there are a few dams which are questionable, in my opinion. I mean, there's one in Indonesia, which was in the Batang Toru ecosystem, which was built primarily to generate Indonesian transportation of energy across to Malaysia. In fact, since you meant, I was thinking of you when I thought of that. 510 megawatts power project, which I don't know what the state is, whether it's still going on or not, but it clearly wasn't invested in or thought through carefully because its location, which is in the sort of northern part of Sumatra, is a long distance away from where the power was to be distributed. It would require devastating impacts due to the tunneling on the world's only population of the most endangered orangutan species, which is a resident of that particular Batang Toru ecosystem. And it wasn't even particularly economically brilliant in its conception. So there's a lot that takes place in the conception of projects and the funding of projects, which leaves a lot to be desired.
So
and I'm hoping projects of that kind would get filtered out by the Hydropower Convention and would get filtered out by the applying of a sustainability standard, as Ashok has described and as all of you have.
It certainly seems from what we're hearing, and certainly in this discussion, that the standard and the industry looking at things in that really kind of focused way on the priority of sustainability might mean different kinds of projects go forward in the future.
Exactly.
Yes.
Ashok, would you like to come in on that, Ashok?
Yes, absolutely. I think you put your finger on it. And what Pavan says is basically that if the standard doesn't throw out large numbers of projects, then it's not working. Because we know that many projects of any kind, not just geothermal, not just hydro, but many others, even geothermal, have problems. But
sorry to interrupt you, Ashok, but we also know that there are some brilliant projects out there. Can you give us an example of one?
No, I'm not sure it's possible. Bridget, it's a perfectly legitimate question that you asked, but the answer to it is much more complex. Any big project, in my opinion, any big large-scale project carries with it a DNA of largeness. And large projects, I am afraid, generally have a lot of negative impacts that people do not take into account, because they talk about economies of scale, they talk about mobilizing resources, and as Pavan says, on ROI, this and that, which are all calculated by eliminating, by ignoring a lot of costs. So big projects, I have very, very great trouble trying to find you an example of one that I would have approved if I were in a position to do so.
Let me just see whether Sharbini Sohaili might differ on this point. Sharbini, what's your view? Because you're obviously making sustainability quite a feature.
Indeed. So we choose our projects very carefully. Yeah? And if you look at in Sarawak, we have a potential for a large, many hydropower projects, but we choose the location very carefully to ensure that we are able to, ensure that the sustainable development is being done. And we need to avoid all the areas where, for example, World Heritage areas, forest reserves and whatnot. And we want to make sure that we intensify our efforts to incorporate sustainability into our development and also our operations. And at the end of the day, it must benefit the community, the people as well. And that's one thing that we pay a lot of attention to, the surrounding communities, the affected communities. And for our latest project, we chose an area where we don't have to relocate anybody. Yeah. And of course, we still need to look at the ecosystem, to look at the wildlife and whatnot. But and we ensure that from the start, we have the HSUB, governing structure, embedded into this project. So we had recently a number of international, people going to look at are there any gaps in how we are being measured against HSUB, for example. And then we look at those gaps and then we try to close them and to ensure that at the end of the day, it is a sustainable development of our hydropower project. So we have to be careful in all of this. And we do have projects where we have, communities who are against it. So we pull back and said, okay, let's look at it and have further dialogues with them. So at the end of the day, people need to accept it. Yeah, and to me, that's sustainable development. We need to look at what the people in the communities are looking at as well. Yeah.
As a leading company in this sector, do you agree with what Ashok Khoshla was saying, which is the standard needs to be really embraced by the industry? And do you welcome that standard? Because it sounds as though it would permit only very carefully thought through projects. Is this something that you welcome, and do you think that your fellow hydropower organisations within the industry, within the sector, will accept it?
Yes, I believe so. And if you look at the San José Declaration, right, basically it says sustainable hydropower. Yeah, and there is, to me, no other choice going forward. I mean, in the past, I do admit that there are many projects which perhaps don't meet the standard that we aspire to. But going forward, I think we have a choice, and we can make that choice to ensure that all the projects we develop are sustainable hydropower only. Yeah.
Ashok, can I come to you, because we're coming close to the end of our discussion, but let's assume that the industry is on this really positive, sustainable path. What do you look into the future and see in terms of the benefits of hydropower? Is it going to deliver the clean energy the world requires?
Look, hydropower has some characteristics which place it in a different category from solar and wind and others, in that it actually is available 24 hours, 365 days a year, if there is enough water, obviously, which is not true of wind and solar, which only produce electricity when there's either wind or sun. And so you have to store it. Now, there are many ways to store energy, including batteries, including all kinds of other rather nasty things that you have to do. But one good way is pumped storage. You pump the water up using this energy from wind, solar, etc., and then you have available that energy when you don't have the wind and the sun. So there are many ways in which hydro is going to be important. It's only going to work, though, if it satisfies the criteria that we've been talking about. And it's clearly not going to be everywhere. It's clearly not even, maybe not even going to be the majority of places. But where it's possible to do, clearly we cannot afford to ignore it, just on gut reaction that it's bad. To tell you the truth, the conservation community that I come from feels very strongly that we have not taken adequate account of the costs in the past. And that is why it has a bad reputation. Now, the hydropower standard gives us a chance to give it a chance, to give it a way of proving itself. And if it works, it would be terrific. I suspect there will be a fair number of small and medium-sized hydro projects of the kind that Shabini was just talking about, that may well pass muster. And if they do, it's terrific.
Excellent.
But we're going to apply it very rigorously.
Can I expand on that a bit more?
Yes, just briefly. Yes, Shabini?
Yeah. So indeed, so to me, hydropower is like a battery, hydropower dam, right? So the combination of hydro, for example, with floating solar is a very powerful combination, which is what we're trying to do in Sarawak. Because during the daytime, you can use the solar, and then you can conserve water behind the dam. And during nighttime, the dam become the battery, to power the communities in the industry. So it is a very strong combination, floating solar and hydropower.
Well, we've come to the end of our discussion today, and it has been fascinating and thought-provoking. Thank you, speakers, Ashok Khoshla, Shabini Suhaili and Pavan Sukhdev. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. David Turk is the US Deputy Secretary for Energy. The US government has unleashed the largest economic stimulus package in history with a strong focus on green energy infrastructure. Eddie Rich, CEO of the International Hydropower Association, spoke to him earlier about what the bipartisan infrastructure bill means for sustainable hydropower in America.
Thank you very much. We have David Turk. I'm honoured to welcome you, US Deputy Secretary of Energy. Your administration has obviously been doing some very exciting stuff around infrastructure, around green stimulus, and particularly the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Can you say a little bit about what that means for more installed capacity and storage from hydropower in the next couple of decades?
Well, thanks very much, Eddie. Thanks, first of all, for your leadership, and thanks for your time. Thanks for inviting me to be part of this conversation and incredibly important event with you. Hydropower is a big deal. It's a big deal in the US. It's a big deal in a lot of countries around the world, of course, as well. And we're really leaning into hydropower, given its existing capabilities, but its potential going forward. And we're incredibly excited at the bipartisan leadership in Capitol Hill that is put on the table, assuming it gets enacted. And I'm quite confident that the bipartisan infrastructure deal, the bill, will get enacted at the end of the day. This is a big deal for hydropower in the US. A lot of other technologies as well, but for hydropower in particular. 750 million US dollars that would come to the Department of Energy to rehabilitate, to retrofit America's dams. That is a large amount of funding in any country. That's a large amount of funding, even in the United States, given the volumes of funding that we deal with. Of that 750 million, there's 125 million to incentivize adding hydropower generation to dams not currently used for hydropower. So that's a potential to use our dams to produce electricity. 75 million to improve efficiency at existing hydropower, and 553 million to support grid resilience, dam safety upgrades, environmental enhancements, all those kinds of things that we need to do to make sure hydropower continues and enhances its role going forward. So that's a big deal. The other thing I'd like to highlight is even through the regular appropriations process, we do appropriations on a yearly basis in the US. For the fiscal year 2020 bill, which is the one pending also on Capitol Hill, we have a 31% increase that we propose. This administration has proposed for funding both marine and hydropower. That is the largest funding request ever for our water technology, our water power technologies office. So this is a historic time more generally in the US for clean energy, and including for hydropower.
Oh, it's terrific news, and it's amazing the sort of quick pace with which you've been able to do all of this. David, could you say a few more words about the challenges, particularly for around hydropower that you have in enacting all of these the bills?
Well, thanks, Eddie. It is a historic moment of opportunity, but it doesn't mean it's going to be easy and straightforward, and there are challenges that we'll need to overcome. I think the biggest challenge, if you want to boil it down, and there's some subcomponents here as well, is time. We've got to work quickly. We've got an aging infrastructure. We've got an aging workforce, and we need to work with a sense of urgency, a sense of dispatch, so that we can take care of some of these problems. On the infrastructure side, 30% of our hydro projects will come up for relicensing in this decade. So we've got to do the kinds of investment that President Biden, Secretary Granholm, myself, others of us in the US government have really been pushing for, so that we can have the infrastructure, including and especially on the hydro side of things. We also have to build the new hydro facilities quickly. We have to move quickly along those lines. Pump storage in particular, which is a key issue. I'm sure it'll come up again and again in the course of the conversations, and hopefully in ours as well further. Takes an average of about 10 years to develop. That's just too long. We need to really be much more streamlined in the way we do things. That's what we're trying to do, in particular with our Hydro Wires initiative, working with developers, trying to streamline, trying to accelerate the project timelines as best we can along those lines. And then the other opportunity, it's a challenge, it's the aging workforce for hydropower, but it's also an incredible opportunity, and that's the number of jobs, the number of new jobs, the number of people coming into the workforce. Optimally, we see up to 150,000 new jobs, 150,000. That is a lot of jobs. Obviously, we have a big marketplace here in the US, but 150,000 new jobs in the US hydropower industry by 2050. So there's a lot of, you can look at it as a challenge. We tend to look at it as an opportunity for new people, new employment, new communities getting that economic boost.
That's great to hear. We've been working together. I've been particularly working with your colleague, Kelly Speaks-Backman, and our friend and board member, Malcolm Turnbull. They've been co-chairing the International Forum on Pumped Storage Hydro. And we've been working with you arm in arm right from the beginning of that. What was the goal for you in co-hosting that forum?
Well, thanks for the nice words about Kelly. She's just a phenomenal leader for us, a terrific colleague, and all of our colleagues in our renewables and efficiency team, which Kelly is the head of. Just an incredibly passionate group of colleagues, just doing incredible work day in and day out. So appreciate the nice words on that front, Eddie. Storage and pump storage is a big deal. Right now, if you look at all the storage that we've got, the long duration storage in particular in the US, 95% of that is pumped hydro storage. So it makes up such an important part of our existing storage capability. We view long duration storage as such a key enabler, a key part of our energy transition, allowing us to get to what President Biden has put on the table is a 2035 clean electricity, all electricity clean by 2035. So one of the key technologies there is that long duration storage. So we've launched what we're calling a long duration energy earthshot, trying to use our levers, our R&D levers, other levers that we have, our Office of Science, our Energy Efficiency and Renewables team, Kelly's team, ARPA-E, our full levers to try to figure out a range of solutions for the long duration storage, including and especially getting as much as we possibly can out of the hydro pump storage part of the equation. So the pump storage piece is so incredibly important. And then the international piece, of course, is incredibly important as well. We're certainly not going to be successful on climate change unless we work with others, unless we share what's working in one country with another country to get the most out of all of our renewable resources. I've had conversations recently with the Brazilian Minister of Energy, for instance. Hydro is such a big part of their current equation. They're having some droughts. They're having some challenges, just like we're having in the US context, other countries are having, brought on by climate change and exacerbated by climate change. We need to work with each other. We need to collaborate and share experiences so we can all move as quickly as we possibly can to overcome these challenges.
Well, it's great to have the US leading the way in this way, taking those messages. And I just want to say, David Turk, US Deputy Secretary of Energy, thank you very much for your time.
Well, thanks, Eddie, and best of luck with the discussions. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you.
Han Jun is president of China Three Gorges, one of the biggest hydropower companies. We caught up with him to learn more about the success of his company in building hydropower capacity in China and elsewhere. And we asked him what message he had for governments, companies and civil society.
女士们、先生们、朋友们，大家好！很荣幸代表中国三峡集团参加世界水电大会企业领袖论坛，与各位相聚云端，共商水电可持续发展。在新冠肺炎疫情持续蔓延、全球能源变革加速演进的时代背景下，本次大会以互联世界的可再生能源为主题，对于共同应对全球气候变化、共建清洁美丽世界具有特殊重要意义。借此机会，我首先代表中国三峡集团，对国际水电协会等全球水电同行长期以来给予中国三峡集团的支持帮助表示衷心的感谢。中国三峡集团是全球最大水电开发企业和中国最大清洁能源集团，始终秉持创新引领发展、零碳共赢未来的企业价值观，奋力实施清洁能源和长江生态环保两翼齐飞，在促进绿色低碳发展、共建清洁美丽世界中日益发挥重要作用。截止目前，中国三峡集团可控装机突破1亿千瓦，其中95%以上为清洁能源，年生产清洁电能超3000亿千瓦时。特别是随着金沙江乌东德水电站全部机组、白河滩水电站首批机组投产发电，中国三峡集团在长江流域运行管理着葛洲坝、三峡、项家坝、西罗渡、白河滩、乌东德6座巨型水电站，基本建成 全球最大沿江清洁能源走廊，将为中国实现碳达峰、碳中和目标提供重要的支撑。在水电开发过程中，中国三峡集团全面贯彻创新、协调、绿色、开放、共享的新发展理念，积极探索水电可持续发展新路。我们始终把创新作为推动水电可持续发展的第一动力，在水电高端装备制造、大坝智能制造、梯级水库优化调度、智慧水电建设等方面取得一批重要创新成果。特别是全球单机容量最大功率100万千瓦水轮发电机组在白鹤滩水电站投产发电，引领全球水电进入100万千瓦机组新纪元。我们始终把共享作为推动水电可持续发展的不懈追求，把水电开发与支持打赢脱贫攻坚战、促进移民发展致富结合起来，统筹推进基础设施、教育、医疗、产业等帮扶措施，让水电开发成果更好地造福人民。在中国三峡集团的帮助下，长江流域梯级电站库区所有贫困县和贫困移民已全部脱贫。中国三峡集团的探索实践表明，水电综合效益大，带动作用强，对于应对全球气候变化、促进实现联合国可持续发展目标具有重要的意义。随着全球应对气候变化开启新征程，水电可持续发展迎来重要的战略机遇期。我们应把握全球能源变革带来的新机遇。新冠肺炎疫情使全球能源格局加速向绿色化、低碳化演进，清洁能源在全球能源供给体系中的地位将进一步提升，将为水电开发利用注入强劲动能。我们应把握疫后经济重振带来的新机遇，越来越多的国家出台绿色新政，把清洁能源投资作为刺激经济复苏的重点领域，将为水电行业创造更多的投资机会。我们应把握数字经济发展带来的新机遇，新一代信息技术加快与水电行业融合发展，智慧水电正由蓝图变为现实，将为水电行业转型升级插上腾飞的翅膀。在看到机遇的同时，我们也要清醒地认识到，水电可持续发展仍面临巨大的挑战。这挑战来自认识偏见，社会上对水电工程的节能减排作用还有不同认识，对水电绿色属性还缺乏统一的认证标准。这挑战来自投资壁垒，一些国家和地区逐步收紧外商投资监管政策，能源投资审查和项目交易难度加大，从而影响跨国水电投资落地。这挑战来自安全风险，随着全球极端天气事件增多和信息化技术广泛应用，水电工厂面临的溃坝、水淹厂房等传统风险和网络安全等非传统风险交织叠加，从而影响水电工程安全稳定运行。面对机遇和挑战，中国三峡集团愿充分发挥自身优势，加强全球水电同行的合作，共同推动达成圣何塞可持续水电宣言，并在联合国气候变化大会第26次缔约方大会上向全球政治领袖阐述可持续水电的关键作用， 为共建清洁美丽世界贡献更多力量。我们愿共同打造质量安全型水电工程，始终把质量安全放在首位，完善水电工程安全风险防控机制，确保水电工程持续安全稳定运行，综合效益最大化。我们愿共同打造创新引领型水电工程，深化水电装备制造、智慧水电建设、水库优化调度等关键核心技术研发攻关，促进水电行业转型升级，不断提高水资源综合利用率。我们愿共同打造多能互补型水电工程，积极推进水风光多能互补一体开发，充分发挥不同清洁能源品种的协同效应，促进构建新型电力系统。我们愿共同打造环境友好型水电工程，统筹推进清洁能源开发利用和流域生态保护修复，实现水电工程经济效益、社会效益、生态效益相统一。我们愿共同打造开放共享型水电工程，与全球水电同行共享中国三峡集团水电开发经验，推动制定可持续水电标准和公共政策，更好地促进全球水电开发利用，为实现联合国可持续发展目标赋能添彩。谢谢大家。
Andrew Forrest is the founder and CEO of Fortescue Metals Group, one of the largest iron ore and steel producers in the world. Eddie Rich, Chief Executive of the IHA, spoke to Andrew about Fortescue's hugely ambitious plans to create green steel through massive investment in sustainable hydropower and green hydrogen around the world.
Thanks very much, Dr. Andrew Forrest, for joining us here today. You've spoken a lot about the urgent and huge need for green hydrogen. Obviously today we're talking about that relationship with hydropower and sustainable hydropower. So what do you see as that link between green hydrogen and hydropower?
Hydropower has an enormous role to play in reducing and eliminating carbon emissions across our planet. Firstly, of course, when you plug in your Tesla to the grid right now, you're not reducing carbon, you're just taking whatever's in the grid. So we need hydropower whenever it's close to a demand source to really continue stepping up, continue supplying that invaluable green energy. So when people do plug in their vehicles, when people do demand green power, that hydropower is there. But for a very long time, Eddie, most of the hydropower of the world has been delinquent, has been isolated, has been stranded, if you will, from demand sources, too isolated or too big or whatever it is. Now, though, Eddie, we have the advent of the world of green hydrogen. And green hydrogen and green energy, we must all come to accept, will be the largest industry in the world. And therefore, hydropower, through direct green electricity or through the creation, if it's too remote to be plugged into a demand source, that hydropower now has a huge new future because we need that green energy to make all the products the world needs. First, energy, green ammonia, green hydrogen, but also products, Eddie, green fertilizers, green iron, green steel, green cement. These are all factors which now can be driven through hydropower.
Yeah, this is interesting. We'll be exploring exactly that topic in one of the later sessions with the CEO of Fortescue Future Industries, Julie Shuttleworth, on the 17th. What are your specific plans for investment in sustainable hydropower?
Okay, we have run-of-river plans now in most continents of the world, in several countries, from Indonesia to Kalimantan, Papua New Guinea, to across Africa, to South America, even here in Australia. So we are advancing plans literally, Eddie, all over the world for sustainable green hydrogen production from run-of-river hydropower. Or if the dam is already built, it isn't run-of-river, then let's make sure none of that energy gets wasted. Let's make sure that it's converted to what the world needs most, which is zero carbon fuel and zero carbon products.
That's great. And you're going to Glasgow in November to the COP26 summit. What are the key messages that you're going to be taking there?
I think we need a very cut-through message here, Eddie, which I'd like everyone who's listening to adopt and to propagate. We need to stop the confusion. At this stage, hydropower is one of the only sources, the few sources of serious and real green energy in the world. But it's getting confused. When we say green hydropower to green hydrogen, people are saying, well, actually, we've got clean hydrogen. Surely that's as good as green. Well, what they're really saying is that's hydrogen made from fossil fuel. And Eddie, as we've acknowledged, green hydrogen, like green energy combined, is going to be the world's largest industry. It doesn't need this very early confusion. Hydrogen made from fossil fuel does not record one of its biggest emissions, which is fugitive emissions. Every time a gas company flares off gas, as we see all over the world, that's called a fugitive, unmeasured emission. There's more fugitive emissions being released into the world than the whole gas demand for the continent of Africa. So we know it's enormous, and we know it's not getting measured, and therefore it's not clean. At least we know with hydropower, Eddie, we know it's clean. There's zero carbon in the supply chain, so it has to be carbon free.
That's super. You've really set the challenge down. Largest industry in the world. We're going to look forward to discussing that during the course of the Congress. I'll be seeing you later on in the Congress, but also at COP in Glasgow. Thank you very much for joining us, Andrew Forrest.
And thank you, Eddie, and thanks to the whole team at Hydropower. We really need your support. We need our planet to go green. You have a leading role.
Thank you so much.
Jean-Bernard Lévy is CEO of EDF. Earlier, we spoke to him about why the company has chosen to develop hydropower alongside wind, solar and nuclear, and where hydro sits in EDF's overall growth plans. Monsieur Lévy discussed the potential for growth in Europe, not only as a generator of electricity, but as an enabler of variable energy generation assets. And of course, he gave us his message to world leaders.
Good morning to you. First of all, I would like to thank the IHA for gathering us all together for this World Hydropower Congress. It's a pleasure for me to be online with you to discuss the role of hydropower in the energy transition, in particular on the eve of COP26, with obviously climate problems continuing to grow all over the world, with widespread awareness and the alarming evidence that we are facing every day. Hydropower is the leading renewable energy worldwide and also in France, producing in 2020 more than all other renewables-based generation combined. Furthermore, hydropower generation is very flexible and offers so far the biggest electricity storage capacities among available technologies. Therefore, it allows the integration of more wind and solar generation capacity in power systems. Regarding EDF, in our energy mix, hydropower is also the primary renewable energy, and overall it's the second energy behind nuclear. In 2015, we have set a global target, which is to double our net installed capacity in the field of renewable energy, reaching a minimum of 60 gigawatt by 2030. Today, we are in line with this objective with 37 gigawatts of renewable energy, including 23 gigawatts of hydro. Concerning Europe, our existing fleet is mainly located in France and in Italy, but we believe there is still significant potential in Europe. First, we need to modernize and add capacities to existing facilities, and then we also need to develop some new major projects, notably pumped storage hydro projects, although we know this is a complicated legal context. Third, we need to develop small hydro. Let me give you a good example of what our company can develop in a sustainable way. The project called Romanche-Gavet, which is in the Alps region, we commissioned it last year, in 2020. It consists in the replacement of 6 old existing power plants by just one underground power plant, whereas the old power plants were in the open air. This project has enabled also a 40% increase in power generation, while obviously returning the river to nature, and hence significantly reducing the environmental impacts of the previous scheme. EDF is a utility that champions low carbon and responsible growth. Indeed, our power generation is essentially carbon-free. 97% in France, our main country, and 87% worldwide. Our CAP 2030 strategy means that our carbon-free power generation will keep on increasing in our global mix around the world. And to achieve this objective, we will rely on 2 main pillars. First, nuclear generation and renewable energy generation, which are complementary, as we know, nuclear and renewables, not nuclear or renewables, nuclear and renewables. Our corporate social responsibility goals are well summarized in our purpose, our raison d'être, which is build a net zero energy future with electricity and innovative solutions and services to help save the planet and drive well-being and economic development. This purpose, this policy, was implemented after long discussions using an innovative and collaborative method within our group and also including external stakeholders. At EDF, we will therefore continue to develop hydro projects in France and worldwide in order to contribute to our objective to double our net installed capacity in the field of renewable energy and to reach this 60 gigawatt target by 2030. Currently, we have already 25 hydro projects under development or construction abroad, totalizing around 8 gigawatts. And we have also several projects in France and in Italy, in particular in pump storage power units, which could reach several gigawatts. Unfortunately, we know there are difficulties due to the European regulatory framework, which is not helpful for pump storage. Let me first address what I would like to say to all Congress participants. Firstly, I strongly believe that there is a great potential for hydropower development all over the world, whether it's for electricity or for water needs in the context of climate change. Energy and water are 2 of the major issues in our century. Hydropower will be at the heart of addressing these issues. EDF is not only a hydropower producer, it's also a leader in multi-purpose water uses, dealing with multiple stakeholders. Secondly, storage through hydro dams is one of the best solutions for energy storage. Hydropower is today the most efficient technology for storing significant quantities of energy, especially through pumped storage plants. Electricity storage is essential with the development of variable renewable energies. Therefore, in our storage plan at EDF, we have set a target of 10 gigawatts of storage by 2035. A large part of these 10 gigawatts will be hydro. And when addressing the world leaders, I would like to tell them that today, as we observe in many countries, a gap between the urgency on climate issues on one side and the lack of efficient regulations on permitting and services remuneration on the other side, we need to help find solutions. And one of these key solutions is pumped storage plants. We have several projects of pumped storage plants in various countries. But it is highly difficult to implement these projects because of permitting or profitability issues. At EDF, we do support the San José Declaration on Sustainable Hydropower, and we call on policymakers to act swiftly on these recommendations, notably on promoting investment, because we could develop more sustainable hydro projects, more, faster, wider. To conclude, at EDF, we consider hydropower as an energy of the future. Hydropower is essential to development of other renewable energies. Hydropower is at the heart of the global energy transition.
尊敬的吉尔主席、利切尔首席执行官、各位专家、各位来宾，大家好！非常荣幸能够参加本次世界水电大会。这场盛会，无论是对于雅砻江流域水电开发有限公司，还是对其他相关企业或组织，以及整个清洁可再生能源行业，都具有非常重要的意义。在这里，我代表雅砻江流域水电开发有限公司，对国际水电协会的精心策划或组织表示崇高的敬意，对国际水电协会长期以来对中国水电事业的关心或支持表示衷心的感谢，并且非常荣幸作为会议的战略合作伙伴支持本次盛会。根据中国政府授权，雅砻江流域水电开发有限公司负责实施雅砻江流域水能资源开发，全面负责雅砻江流域梯级水电站的建设和管理。雅砻江干流规划可开发装机容量约30吉瓦。目前，雅砻江下游5个梯级水电站已全部建成投产，其中包括中国20世纪投产的最大水电站二滩水电站，以及拥有当今世界最高大坝的锦屏1级水电站和拥有世界最大埋深、最大规模水工水动群的锦屏2级水电站。雅砻江中上游水电开发科学有序推进，中游洋放沟水电站作为中国首个100万千瓦级整体 EPC 项目，已于今年6月实现首台机组投产发电，拥有坝高达295米的粘土新墙堆式坝的2号口水电站，也于今年8月刚刚实现首台机组投产发电。同时，雅砻江公司依托一个主题开发一条江的显著优势，在稳步推进全流域水能资源开发的同时，结合流域清洁能源资源的禀赋特性，着手打造1000万千瓦级水、风、光互补清洁可再生能源基地。根据初步规划，雅砻江流域沿岸两侧风电、光伏资源可开发量约40吉瓦，相当于再造一条水电雅砻江。截至目前，雅砻江流域水电开发有限公司水电或新能源总装机规模达到约17吉瓦，资产规模超过1500亿元人民币，是一个多种清洁可再生能源发电企业。今年是中国第14个5年规划开局之年，也是中国政府提出碳达峰、碳中和3060目标的第1年。雅砻江流域水、风、光互补清洁可再生能源基地已列入中国国家“十四五”规划，对雅砻江流域水电开发有限公司来说意义重大。当前以风电、光伏为代表的新能源技术加速发展，赋予了雅砻江流域清洁能源开发更加广阔的舞台和空间。 展望未来，雅砻江流域清洁能源基地有望建成世界最大的清洁可再生能源基地之一，有利于推进能源革命，增强能源保障，助力碳达峰、碳中和目标的实现，具有重大的经济或社会意义。在推进雅砻江流域水、风、光互补清洁可再生能源基地的建设中，我们还将遇到各种技术或管理难题。雅砻江流域水电开发有限公司将在国际水电协会的支持下，继续加强与国内外行业同仁的深入合作，对标学习，共同促进清洁可再生能源互补开发或可持续利用，为全球清洁可再生能源可持续发展做出更大的贡献。最后，预祝本次会议圆满成功，祝大家身体健康，万事如意。谢谢大家。
Helen Clark was number 2 in the UN and previously Prime Minister of New Zealand. She's a long-time advocate of tackling climate change and a proponent of the Sustainable Development Goals. Helen Clark, when you were Prime Minister of New Zealand and then Administrator of the United Nations Development Programme, how high on the agenda was climate change?
It was very high when I held both those positions. When I came to power as Prime Minister, we had a pledge that we would move to ratify the Kyoto Protocol, which hadn't been done. We did that, but then we faced the challenge of how to get New Zealand to up its game on climate action. And when you have 50% of your greenhouse gases coming from the agricultural sector, that's more challenging than if it's a matter more of dealing with your car fleet and the energy mix alone. So it was challenging. We tried a carbon tax. Farmers revolted against that. We brought in an emissions trading scheme. We had goals for carbon neutrality in our electricity and transport sectors. We did our best. Then I went to UNDP, where climate action became an increasingly large part of our portfolio, with significant support from Global Environment Facility and also from the new Green Climate Fund.
And is enough being done now? And why is this important for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals?
We have the Paris Agreement from 2015, which tells us that we should see temperatures peak at 1.5 degrees Celsius. Well, we're on track right now for a 3.2 degree Celsius future. This is catastrophic. So clearly not enough is being done. I would draw particular attention to the issue of coal in the energy mix. All OECD countries need to be out of coal by 2030 and the rest of the world by 2040. We need to see real steps towards that. And obviously hydropower will be one of the solutions to getting away from coal.
That's my next question, actually. How do you see sustainable hydropower fitting into a decarbonised energy system?
As a New Zealander with a high degree of dependence in the country on hydropower, obviously I think it's got a future. I think it's a more complicated future than it was when New Zealand constructed a network of dams on its great rivers. There are many more constraints now, and there should be around our rivers, our wildlife habitats. So I think the moves within the sector to look at sustainable hydropower and raising the bar as to what should proceed and what shouldn't is good. I look with great concern, for example, at the hydropower development in the Selous Game Reserve in Tanzania, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Whether it can keep that status with hydropower plonked, right in it is a very, very big question. So providing it's sustainable and sensitive to communities, biodiversity, habitats, yes, it's got a future.
Finally, Helen Clark, what is your message to world leaders at COP26?
My message to world leaders at COP26 is get serious. There's been so many meetings, so many talks, so many pledges, to some extent commitments, and far too little action. We are condemning future generations to a horrible future of more and more fires, more and more heat stress, more and more health complications from the mosquito and tick breeding seasons expanding, more and more natural disasters caused by adverse climate events. Is that the future we want to leave to future generations? It's not one I want to see.
Helen Clark, it's been a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you for joining us. Wu Suwan is the Secretary General of the Global Energy Interconnection Development and Cooperation Organisation. We spoke with him about the need for integrated decarbonised grids and the role of hydropower in balancing the grid.
尊敬的阿尔瓦拉多总统、吉尔主席、各位嘉宾、女士们、先生们，大家好！很高兴参加世界水电大会。本次大会以可再生能源精诚合作为主题，发布水电圣何塞宣言，对于促进可再生能源发展、推动应对气候变化具有重要的意义。首先，我代表全球能源互联网发展合作组织，代表刘振亚主席，对大会的成功举办表示热烈的祝贺。女士们、先生们，当今世界气候变化、环境污染、资源匮乏、贫困、疾病等问题日益严峻，严重威胁人类生存与发展。2015年9月，中国国家主席习近平在联合国发展峰会提出全球能源互联网重大倡议，得到国际社会高度赞誉和积极响应。全球能源互联网实质是智能电网加特高压电网加清洁能源，是能源生产清洁化、配置广域化、消费电气化的新型能源系统，是清洁能源在全球范围大规模开发、输送和使用的重要平台，为推动世界能源转型和人类可持续发展提供了系统解决方案。构建全球能源互联网，总体可按国内互联、州内互联、全球互联3个阶段推进，到2050年基本建成。届时，全球清洁能源装机占比将超过90%，成为主力电源，能源系统碳排放基本净零，全社会碳减排边际成本仅为每吨15美元，远低于每吨30到100美元的其他方案，以更低成本、更优路径实现巴黎协定目标，根本解决全球近8亿无电人口供电问题，让世界成为能源充足、天蓝地绿、亮亮堂堂、和平和谐的地球村。女士们、先生们，水电是清洁、低碳、高效的可再生能源，在全球能源互联网中将发挥重要的作用。一是低碳电力的支柱。2020年，全球水电发电量约4.5万亿千瓦时，超过其他可再生能源之和，相当于减少燃煤20亿吨，减排二氧化碳38亿吨。预计到2050年，全球水电装机将达到31亿千瓦，为实现全球碳中和提供可靠支撑。二是可负担能源的保障。非洲刚果河下游水电基地开发成本低至每千瓦时3到5美分，采用11回特高压送至西非、北非、东非和南部非洲，落地电价比当地上网电价低每千瓦时2到5美分，有较强的市场竞争力。三是新能源发展的助推器，水电出力特性较好，可调节性强，在全球能源互联网中将起到调节器作用。 与风电、光伏发电等间歇性、波动性电源联合运行，实现多能互补，大幅提高新能源开发规模、利用效率和投资效益。女士们、先生们，合作组织致力构建全球能源互联网，目前有会员1205家，覆盖133个国家，在全球建立6个区域委员会和16个国家委员会，发布全球及各大洲能源互联网研究与展望、清洁能源开发与投资、刚果河水电开发与外送研究等50多项创新成果，建成全球首个集项目推动、交流合作、信息服务等功能于一体的能联全球发展合作平台。我们愿与各方加强合作，为推动世界能源转型与人类可持续发展做出更大的贡献。谢谢大家。
Andrea Metza is the Costa Rican Minister of Environment and Energy. We spoke to her about how Costa Rica has combined its abundant natural renewable resources to maximise their effects, and how the country has developed its energy capabilities.
Un saludo para las personas participantes de este Congreso Mundial de Hidroelectricidad. Es para mí un gusto compartir con ustedes y dar a conocer la experiencia de la conformación de nuestra matriz eléctrica renovable y sostenible, cuya base principal es la hidroelectricidad, con una participación del 66%. Costa Rica ha tenido históricamente una vocación hidroeléctrica que se fundamenta en la riqueza hídrica del país y en la capacidad demostrada de gestionarla de manera económica, social y ambientalmente sostenible. Ha logrado consolidar una de las matrices más diversas del mundo, al integrar diferentes fuentes de generación eléctrica renovable, como la hidroeléctrica, la geotérmica, eólica, biomásica y la solar, dejando los combustibles fósiles como un respaldo al sistema, con una mínima participación. El principal logro del país ha sido consolidar una matriz diversa, resiliente, renovable, garantizando la seguridad y la calidad del servicio en los últimos 40 años, aún en los periodos hidrológicos más críticos de la historia. Es motivo de orgullo para aquellos que aportamos con nuestro trabajo al sector eléctrico de este país, que en los últimos 6 años hayamos alcanzado más de un 98% de energía eléctrica proveniente de fuentes renovables, así como los niveles de emisión de gases de efecto invernadero más bajos de la historia, 25 toneladas de CO2 por gigawatt hora. Desde 1949 se le asigna al Instituto Costarricense de Electricidad como empresa estatal el desarrollo de los recursos hidráulicos y el aprovechamiento de la energía hidroeléctrica para fortalecer el desarrollo económico y el bienestar social del país, con un enfoque de protección de los recursos naturales. El éxito y desarrollo de la matriz eléctrica se ha basado en la consistencia de una política energética nacional que elabora el Ministerio de Ambiente y Energía como ente rector en la materia, con la participación de múltiples sectores. Con el tema eléctrico resuelto, Costa Rica transita hacia una economía descarbonizada, concentrando sus esfuerzos hacia la transición energética de los sectores del transporte, industria, impulsadas desde el uso de la electricidad limpia. El acervo hidrológico, con datos confiables recopilados desde entonces, sustentan un conocimiento del recurso hidroeléctrico que ha permitido su desarrollo planificado, considerando las mejores opciones según los recursos económicos, los beneficios de cada aprovechamiento y las proyecciones en el futuro. Al día de hoy, el parque hidroeléctrico alcanza 2.331 megawatts, un 66% de la capacidad instalada total del país, y sigue siendo soportado por una red de información hidrológica compuesta de más de 100 estaciones activas que alimentan los procesos de planificación y operación del sistema eléctrico nacional. En esta época, más que nunca, la competencia por el uso del agua constituye una limitante y a la vez una gran oportunidad. Los aprovechamientos hidroeléctricos deberán responder a proyectos multipropósito, integrados dentro de una gran estrategia de desarrollo territorial regional, que va mucho más allá de la óptica de la energía es decir, que garanticen la continuidad o prestación de los servicios ecosistémicos, agua, consumo humano, riego, biodiversidad, recreación, entre otros, así como enfrentar las adversidades frente al cambio climático. Como país hemos podido demostrar que existe la posibilidad de tener una economía que produzca electricidad con fuentes 100% renovables, que genere empleos, que es dinámica y que está alineada con el plan de descarbonización y las metas del Acuerdo de París.
Join me tomorrow for the launch of the Hydropower Sustainability Standard, a huge moment in the history of the sector and I believe the first such sustainability standard in renewables. Before the launch, you can join the conversation about interconnected renewable grids, how to ensure that we have the right mix in the system at the regional, national and international levels to establish a modern and affordable renewable energy grid. And please remember to comment on the San José Declaration on Sustainable Hydropower by visiting the Congress website. Thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Sarawak is a Malaysian state on Borneo. The capital, Kuching, is a bustling city set on the Sarawak River. It's one of the most beautiful parts of the world, known for the rugged, dense rainforest, protected parkland with amazing wildlife. Sarawak has an abundance of natural resources that have been harnessed to light up the state using predominantly renewable hydropower.
We aim to be the regional powerhouse and the leader of green energy in the region. And I think the combination of hydropower and solar is a very powerful combination. We can become the battery of Southeast Asia, actually, by sharing our renewable energy sources to our neighbors.
Sarawak Energy has decarbonised its power system by 68% since it shifted its focus to renewable hydropower in 2010. It's also committed to the United Nations Global Compact to encourage businesses to adopt sustainable and socially responsible policies.
We're the first corporation in Malaysia to sign to 1.5 degrees C commitment. It's a voluntary commitment by us, and we need to commit to our targets, and then we need to monitor it, how we're going to achieve it by 2030.
A major UN scientific report has warned human activity is changing the climate. Companies need to act fast. Sarawak is focusing on new clean energies, including green hydrogen. So how do you make green hydrogen? Hydrogen is produced by a process known as electrolysis. An electrical current is used to separate hydrogen from oxygen in the water. If the electricity used in the process comes from renewable sources such as hydro, then the hydrogen is green. Sarawak's hydrogen production plant and refueling station at Kuching produces enough green hydrogen to power up to 5 fuel cell buses and 10 fuel cell cars per day, all with zero carbon emissions. It's a small beginning. Producing green hydrogen is expensive, so you need to scale up.
If we can scale it up, and then part of that will be for export to countries like Japan and Korea and Taiwan. And then part of that will be used for local transportation. And I think then we can push the cost down to a level where it can be very competitive compared with internal combustion engine.
3 million people live here. A quarter live in mountainous areas, some very remote. The government's strategy aims to light up the whole state by 2025. Currently, while its cities are fully electrified, 3% of the rural population remains to be so. The plan is to extend the grid where possible and to deploy off-grid renewable schemes to the most remote areas.
We hope that by 2023, we will be able to supply all renewable hydropower to all places in the state. And for the remote areas, we will be using solar and micro hydro to supply power to these people. And we are hoping to achieve 100% electrification of the state before 2025.
Bukun Dam is one of the highest concrete-filled rock-face dams in the world. Sarawak Energy also operates Batang Air and Murum and is building Balai downstream. If not managed, building huge hydro infrastructures risks damaging the environment and communities. The Hydropower Sustainability Assessment Protocol gives companies a full view of the impact of projects.
We adopt the protocol, the HSAP, 26 topics, stretch from technical, economics, financial, technical, and then social and environment as well. We need to look at a holistic perspective.
Joan is an environmental scientist. She's part of an assessment team trained at the International Hydropower Association's Sustainability Academy.
Now it's more than 20 people in the team. So we were set up in 2014. We were proactively trying to manage our risks and ensure that we continue to comply with the international good and best practices. So at that time, we tried to establish ourselves as a renewable hydropower specialist.
The aim is to become the sustainable battery of Southeast Asia.
I grew up in Sarawak, and we are blessed with green forests and clean air and great environment. And I would like to see the same for my children and my grandchildren as well.
This hydroelectricity power plant blends almost seamlessly into its surroundings in the French Alps. Most of the inner workings of the Romanche-Gavet site are set deep inside the rocky core of the Beldon mountain range. The Romanche River has been used to create hydroelectricity for more than a century, but EDF has transformed the way it harnesses the power of nature here in order to help protect it.
This was the most important hydro project in France, and it's very important for EDF because Gavet is a good example of what we can do to develop sustainable hydropower and to show that we can simultaneously develop a carbon-free and renewable energy and respect the environmental.
Creating this subterranean power plant, one of France's largest, cost 400 million euros and took 10 years to complete. Engineers had to blast and drill their way through the mountainside to create a 10-kilometre-long tunnel. Taking the operation underground dramatically reduces its ongoing impact on the surrounding area. And in terms of productivity, this plant can generate 40% more electricity than the 6 power stations and 5 dams it's replaced. The Romanche-Gavet site here in France is increasing its output of energy, but while still protecting the environment. Finding ways to generate more clean, green, renewable power is a global concern. And safeguarding the environment and biodiversity at a very local level is at the heart of the project here. And it's an example that can be followed around the world. The unused dams and power stations are being dismantled. Only one will remain, a refurbished reminder of the area's heritage. 4 hectares of industrial wasteland will become natural alpine landscape, a painstaking process that's expected to take 3 years.
Le démantèlement a un enjeu particulier qui est la gestion des déchets qui sont produits par la déconstruction des centrales. EDF identifie et trie minutieusement tous les déchets entre valorisables et déchets ultimes afin de valoriser au maximum les déchets sur les sites. On a donc un impact CO2 moindre et un volume de déchets ultime très faible. C'est très agréable de travailler et de porter ce projet car en fait le visage de la vallée, de la Romanche, va être considérablement amélioré et va être beaucoup plus naturel qu'actuellement.
Further along the river, its bed and banks are already being restored to nature. Botanical expertise has been drafted in to keep the flora faithful to its roots.
Tout a été fait en végétal local, donc c'est vraiment des végétaux sauvages d'origine locale qui ont été utilisés et ça a été même prélevé à l'échelle de la vallée de la Romanche. C'est un grand changement parce que moi je l'ai connu avec la terre à nu, il n'y avait vraiment rien, il y avait quasi même plus de sol, il y avait beaucoup de cailloux et du coup de voir aujourd'hui cette végétation qui a reprise avec de la diversité, on observe pas mal d'insectes, donc c'est quand même un bon indicateur lorsqu'il y a des insectes dans un milieu de fonctionnalité écologique du milieu. Donc oui, je suis assez satisfaite.
The International Hydropower Association wants to ensure all facilities are taking steps to improve the way they impact on their surroundings. This project in the French Alps was independently assessed under the Hydropower Sustainability Assessment Protocol and scored highly for its environmental management. It means the Romanche Valley can regain the natural beauty of its past while moving towards a greener future.